Do you want to call yourself an artist but can't quite bring yourself to? In this episode, you'll find out why.
So I think for me, I've only recently started calling myself an artist, which is interesting. And I think because I'm no longer working in a kind of a corporate job, I'm doing my art full time. I feel like I can give myself permission now to call myself an artist. Whereas before, I'd quite often introduce myself with my job title, which was an IT project manager, because it was easier to have a conversation around that rather than I'm an artist, but then caveat it with, but I'm not doing it full time, but I also work in IT. And so, yeah, I suppose that was my journey to being able to declare myself as an artist. What about you, Debs?
So before we go on to me, did you say to people, I'm an IT person, but I also do art? Or did you just not?
It would depend probably on who I was with and what we're talking about. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I just didn't feel like I had the courage probably to go into my art side of things, and would just talk about my IT side, whereas other people, I would have more, if I felt like they were interested in it or might be interested in it, I'd have more conversations with them about the art side of my life.
Yeah, I think that still applies in a way, even when you are an artist, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I had a different experience because I've had ill health. So when you're not working, because in my 30s and 40s I was not working, people often say, particularly at that age, what do you do? What do you do for a living? It's just like an intro, particularly people you don't know, it's an introduction to who you are. And I didn't really want to get into the illness particularly. So I'd say I wasn't working because of ill health. And you go down a rabbit hole of, well, why are you unwell? And sometimes you just don't want to get into those conversations. Yeah. I think then I went into doing study at Open University. So then I introduced myself as I'm studying, which felt better than having to explain all my personal details really about what was wrong with me, etc. So actually, when I started doing work as an artist, I wasn't really doing work as an artist. And I'm not sure, it's only very recently that I've started to call myself an artist, because I always describe myself as an art tutor, because I started off topsy-turvy and did work in village halls. And that is an easy thing to say to people, because people really understand.
They get it straight away, don't they?
They really get it.
Yeah.
It's a very easy thing to say. Whereas if you say you're an artist, then people don't know whether you're a hobby artist. They don't know. People do describe themselves as an artist at all sorts of different levels of their art journey, don't they?
Yeah. And you can be quite often met with a bit of confusion from people about what that actually means to be an artist, I think. And that's maybe when the conversation feels a little bit difficult and awkward as well.
Well, when I was first doing it, people used to say, what type of artist are you? And I think at the beginning, I just didn't have an idea of what type of artist I was. So it was difficult to say, I am a landscape artist, or I enjoy doing abstract. I can talk so much more easily about it all now because I understand who I am as an artist. But when you first start, particularly if you think, I want to actually have a career in art as opposed to the hobby artist, because I think as a hobby artist, you can say, oh, I've just started, I did it a couple of years and I'm enjoying, I go to classes or I don't go to classes. And I think it's fairly straightforward to explain. Yeah, you can even say you don't know, can't you?
And I think that's even a little bit more comfortable for people if you say to people that you're just practicing it as a hobby. I think people can get their heads around that a little bit more as well.
Yeah. Whereas if you're doing it as a
profession,
if you're doing it as a profession, first of all, people think that you can't be earning any money at it.
Yeah, that's their first thought. Yeah,
it is. Yes. They're just like, they see you as a hobby artist, even if you're not describing yourself as a hobby artist.
Yeah.
And then they get really surprised that you've got a whole art studio. Do you think They do, don't they? That
Yeah,
you've got a space to, you've
I've had
experienced
those
that.
experiences. Yeah, definitely.
Because I do think it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because at the beginning, when you describe yourself as an artist, you don't know exactly who you are?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. Why would you want to invite a conversation with somebody if you don't know how to articulate what it is that you're doing and why? That in itself is going to feel uncomfortable, isn't it? But I think we all have to start out at that point, and by having conversations about what you are doing as an artist, I think it does help you clarify that in your own mind as well, because people will come back and they'll ask you questions and it will get you thinking about everything. I think, but we've said many times, like being an artist is a very unique thing as well. Like it's a very specific path that each one of us are on, following our own interests.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. So when you first describe yourself as an artist, people go, "Oh, if you're painting, can you do?" And it's often,
Can you paint my dog? Or yeah,
"Can you paint my dog?" Or I've had all sorts of, and
yeah,
I still do actually. You have all sorts of requests.
yeah. They just put everything into one bucket, don't they? And think that if you're an artist, you can just paint or draw
You can,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you can do portraits. You can do
yeah, whatever.
whatever they want from you.
Yeah,
You can do. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yes,
yeah,
as opposed to the fact that you have your own unique interests. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's almost like you have to explain that to people in a way.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Which actually, to be fair, they often say, "What do you do?" "I'm an artist." Then they say, "What sort of artist?" And they do ask
yeah,
that.
yeah, they do,
Yeah.
which makes it easier to explain. And it could be just that at the moment I am exploring landscapes or something. It doesn't have to be a definitive answer to your identity as an artist. You could keep it quite light, which is maybe an easier way to have that conversation with people.
Yeah. If you're going to start saying, "Right, I am an artist now," then having some sort of preparatory, "Oh, I I love to paint landscapes and I work in acrylic and I'm exploring abstraction," is something like that.
Mm,
That sort of
mm,
explains who you are to
yeah,
people, doesn't it?
yeah,
As opposed to, so when they turn around and say, "Can you paint my dog?" you
yeah,
say, "Actually, I'm a landscape artist." And sometimes you might paint somebody's dog, but that's a choice that you make
yeah,
as opposed to a description of who you are, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And we discussed about negative associations.
Because I think sometimes that holds people back because declaring yourself as an artist is quite a brave thing to do because people often think, like we said at the top, you've got no money, or they might think you're a little bit off the wall, a bit crazy for being an artist. And there's other sorts of associations around things like addiction as well, poor mental health. So there's quite a few, I think, negative connotations around being an artist. So that might be blocking you, or it might bring up some strange reactions in other people as well that kind of put you off being an artist or declaring yourself as an artist.
Yeah, and I think that we're not just talking about visual artists, are we, when we say
No,
this?
no, because often if you think about very talented musicians have taken their own lives and been lost to alcoholism and all sorts of things. So I think that also gets bundled up in the artist kind of phrase, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And money as well. Or
Yeah.
have we covered that? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think,
I think money's a big thing for people, isn't it? I mean, these sorts of things can even stop people from getting started in exploring their art because they just kind of think, oh, it's never going to get me anywhere because I'm not going to make any money from it. So why even try?
to be
Um,
fair, I think nowadays it's a lot easier, but you
mm,
do have to be. I remember my son telling me that I was a business artist as
mm,
opposed to, and a real artist is actually, he said, "You're a business artist as opposed to a real artist." how he described, and that was, I think he was complimenting me. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not
Take it
quite
as a
sure.
compliment, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting to see that he had that sort of distinction.
Yeah.
And I think the real artist is probably the starving one
The
who's not
tortured
actually got off the
soul.
ground.
Yeah.
Who gets known when they
Yeah.
once they've died and their artwork is discovered at that
Yeah.
point.
I think it's important to also discuss why it's important to say you're an artist, and why it's something that I think if you're practicing art, it's a good thing to get over and get into those conversations with people, especially new people, because you never really know who you're talking to. Like, they could know somebody that owns a gallery, for instance, and that gallery owner is looking for a particular landscape artist or something. I think it's important to be open-minded about who you're speaking to. And like you were saying, Debs, if you can even just come up with a couple of lines that you want to use that you've almost rehearsed in talking about your art and who you are, that makes it a lot easier as well, if you can start to express yourself. And then you'll find if somebody's genuinely interested, you can take that conversation further. And it can be a really rewarding conversation, actually. I have the best conversations with creative people because they just get it, don't they?
Yes, yes. And some people, I think you have to learn discernment because
Yes.
for certain, because some people are just not interested. And
Yeah.
I could talk about, it's obvious that we could talk about art for hours because we do talk about art. And I do think that if some people are just not that interested,
Yeah.
whereas other people, like you say, even if they're not interested in your art, they're often interested in your journey
Mm.
or where you're at,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that you're following what more of your authenticity really, and
Yeah.
where you actually want to be.
Yeah.
That's a lot of something. People are quite interested in that, and I think what's been interesting is this podcast. People say, "Oh, and you've got a podcast," and
Mm-hmm.
almost like having a podcast makes you a bit more like real. It's
Yeah.
really,
It's
it is
funny,
very
isn't it?
strange.
Yeah.
And the other thing I found strange was that when I used to feel that I couldn't say I was an artist because I hadn't gone to art school.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what other people feel, and this really surprised me, was you're actually doing this
Mm-hmm.
and taught yourself. This self-taught artist
Mm.
isn't necessarily seen as a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, so you're actually where you are and you've done it by
Yeah,
yourself.
you've had the
You
ambition and the courage
you
to
must
do
be
it
talented.
yourself.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
must be talented.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, but and that's, you get that sort of, and that never occurred to me
Mm-hmm.
because I started teaching art as an art tutor only because other people were interested, and I thought I'd open the local
Yeah.
village class, and that's all all it was. I was just like telling a lot of people what I was doing. It's so interesting, people's reactions. And I think if they ask you about your IT job,
Mm.
you don't get that reaction, do you?
No. No. No.
They're like, okay.
Yeah. Next.
I just want to circle back to, why is it important to say you're an artist? If somebody asks you what job you do, now we're talking about people who want to have a career as an
Mm-hmm.
artist or want to sell work, because I think it's different from, are we differentiating that? If you're a hobby artist, it's probably the
Yeah,
same.
I think if you're a hobby artist and you go to your local arts club or whatever, maybe once a week, and practice art there, you're probably not as trying to find the right words. I don't want to say career driven, but it's like you're doing it just for the pleasure of it. Whereas I think if you've got ambitions to be in galleries, to have exhibitions and those sorts of things, I think it is more important for those types of people to declare themselves as artists because of the whole knock on effect that will have.
And I think that for the hobby artist, they probably haven't got the same issues in saying they're an artist,
Yeah,
ironically.
yeah.
It's because it's probably not, they're probably not invested as much in those
It's
words. It's
not so
more,
much,
they're just,
yeah, it's not so much of a loaded term, is it? It's just they
uh,
just like doing art. Whereas if you're an artist and you're wanting to take it further, that can have a lot of other associations, like we spoke about. So,
yes. A really good example is that my 3-year-old granddaughter, she's a little bit older now, when I was talking to her about what she wanted to do when she grew up, and one of the questions was, I asked her what things that mummy and daddy did, but when I said, "Oh, would you like to do something like me, which is to become an artist?" And she was like, "I'm already an artist,"
that's
and I'm
brilliant.
like, "Fair
Yeah,
comment."
that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, it is. It is. So we've all got a right to say that we're
Yeah,
artists.
yeah,
But I think that it's important, and this is what we were saying, to say that you're an artist if that's where you want to be.
yeah.
As, yeah.
I do think it's really important for your mindset as well to actually be able to say that out loud to people, because what you think is going to turn into words, and then your words are going to actually turn into action. So if you're not speaking to other people about it, you're going to miss opportunities like exhibitions. You might be speaking to another artist and you just don't even know until you bring up
Mm,
the subject as well, who might have
mm.
all sorts of connections into studios or other artists and that kind of thing. So there are so many other things that can open up once you start talking about it more.
And also the perception of people's perception of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that can open up opportunities as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're described as an artist, then people will come to you and ask you to do something because you are an artist as well.
Yeah.
And it's surprising. People will say to me, I live in a village, and somebody who I don't really know will say, "Oh, you're the artist." And
Mm-hmm.
it's quite interesting. And that's just because of how you've been portrayed.
Yeah.
That yeah. So once you start verbalizing it,
Yeah.
it almost becomes more true.
It does, but it starts with you, doesn't it? You've got to start by telling other people that you are an artist. And then I suppose as your career develops, there's all sorts of other things that, such as writing your artist statement, writing about what your art is all about. And these are the beginning stages of it. It's just like speaking to other people about your art and why you're doing it and what you're doing. And then you might have an interview with a gallery. It's taking it step by step, isn't it? By having those initial conversations and just declaring yourself as an artist. And it's about
I think
having that belief in yourself as well, that you are an artist. You're saying it out loud. You're almost confirming it back to yourself as well.
And I think that's why it's so important to actually say it,
Yeah.
because it increases the belief in yourself.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to move towards, if you are having difficulty in saying it, and we
Mm-hmm.
recognize that this is definitely an issue for people,
Mm-hmm.
then you've done a blog, I know, on this,
Mm-hmm.
and you suggested some exercises that could help people to
Yeah.
look at themselves as an artist. And
Yeah.
yeah, so perhaps you could go through those things,
Yeah,
those.
sure. I think the first thing to really try and uncover is if you're getting really stuck just pronouncing yourself as an artist, but you know deep down it's something that you want to do and pursue further. I think it's really helpful to try and work out what's standing in your way, whether it's something like, I want to be an artist, but I'm scared that I'm going to be poor, or maybe you're worried about like social rejection because it's something a bit different. A good way to do that is if you start doing some journaling around it and just curiously ask yourself why you don't want to call yourself an artist or what's stopping me. Quite often, it might be actually that when you start thinking about these things and writing these things down, that it might have been the voice of an old art school teacher or somebody that said you're not talented enough to be an artist.
Mm.
So there's all sorts of things that can crop up and can get in our own way. Once you've got a bit of an idea around this, though, what you can do is turn that kind of negative belief into a positive affirmation. So if something that came up said that you're not talented, you could make an affirmation, something around the fact that you are talented, to have belief in yourself, to keep going with the art because it's important for you, and create a set of affirmations around that. The reason why that helps is that if you can turn that negative belief that you've been telling yourself for so long in the back of your head without even realizing it, your brain starts to actually believe it. Whereas if you can turn that into something positive and reinforce a new positive idea into your head, then you will start to look for more opportunities and it will start to open your eyes up to what's possible. But before you've done that work, it's very, very difficult to kind of get over it. I really do think you need to uncover some of this stuff before you can start to build your confidence.
I think journaling as well can help you to discover who you are as an artist as well.
Definitely.
And if you actually understand more of where you're going, what you're interested in, all that sort of thing, then that helps you also to articulate it to somebody else.
For sure.
Because you have to articulate it to yourself first.
Yes, you have to
Yeah.
know. You have to have an idea of the kind of thing that you're at least interested in and where you want to go with it. And that, again, will give you more confidence, won't it? Because if you know your underlying reasons for creating art, it makes it a lot more easier to follow that with more momentum and with more confidence, doesn't it? If
Yeah.
you've got that belief in what you're doing is for you.
Yeah. So when we did, this was to do with business, but when we did Amanda's art business course,
Yeah.
we actually, the first thing that you did is start to look at how you wanted your business to run, but also who you were as an artist and why you were there in the first place. And we dug really deep, and that was a journaling exercise, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where it was quite interesting because Ruth and I connected, not just because we joined at the same time. It was to do with the fact that our art is reflecting some of the experiences in our lives. So there's a little bit more to this than meets the eye. And I think that's why it can sometimes be quite tricky. So we came to art I came to it from a health point of view, and you came to it from your reasons too. And it's all tied up in this. I am an artist.
Definitely. It runs deep, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. And that's probably why it becomes difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and it's a very personal thing. What I would say is that treat it with curiosity and interest and intrigue rather than going, oh, I need to have all of this stuff figured out. Just go gently with yourself. The exercise that we did was basically just keep asking yourself why. So, for example, say if you paint trees, ask yourself why. The initial answer might be because I love nature. And then you ask yourself, why do I love nature? Because it has a sense of calm and serenity. Why is that important to me? Because X, Y, Z. And then you'll find that you'll actually uncover, oh, that is the kind of the deep reasoning behind my art. And this exercise might take a few weeks to get to the bottom of as well. It's not something you sit down and do in a day.
And that's not necessarily that. It's not what you tend to share either, because it's quite deep.
Because it's yeah, I agree.
But you will understand more that you are interested in, or whatever it is. And so that is something that you probably articulate the more surface level stuff. But it's really it is interesting.
Yeah, I suppose the only other thing is just probably once you're at a point where you feel comfortable to start having those conversations, it just takes practice and time as well, like anything else. The first time you do it might be really scary, but you will get more used to having those conversations. And like you said earlier, Debs, you'll get more used to as well the kind of people's responses that you get. You'll know you can either go a bit deeper with them or it's maybe I should change the topic of conversation. I guess the other thing is just keep practicing and just build on that confidence.
Yeah, and opportunities will arise and it is quite interesting that happens. Things that you've perhaps not thought of.
I know, and totally out of the blue and not where you expected it to come from either.
And you'll also get better over time at saying no to things that you're not interested in, because you'll hone in. And it does take time. It's not an instant thing. But calling yourself an artist is almost the start.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really interesting. We're on to takeaways, which means that we want to tell you what we've learned from this. So my takeaway from this episode is that what I didn't realise is this is a bit of an ongoing process. So even though I've called myself an art tutor and now I've actually changed and now call myself an artist, it's still quite scary to go out at different levels as well. So what I mean by that is I'm quite comfortable to call myself an artist to somebody who says, what do you do for a living now? But I'm quite frightened of going to a gallery and calling myself an artist. There are different sort of levels of this. That's made me think that maybe those things I need to do a little bit of going back to the journaling or whatever, having a think about, because in reality, I'm not just doing this. You say it online as well, don't you? We say that we're doing it on these podcasts. We are calling ourselves artists now. But it's just made me think that I've still probably got a few little blocks there.
Niggles. Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. I think that's something important to note. It does depend on the audience that you're talking to, doesn't it? And what kind of conversations you're going to be having. I do think, though, like generally speaking, everybody in the art world is pretty nice and understanding. And so I think having those conversations is normally a really pleasurable thing to do. I went to an open studio a couple of weeks ago and was speaking to an artist there. And that was fantastic because she gave me lots of different ideas and things to think about that I wouldn't have necessarily had that conversation with her. So for me, I think it's really important to speak to other artists and to share that knowledge that we have between us, because it is such a unique thing to do, to be an artist, and it can be really, really challenging. So I suppose that's the thing for me in terms of having those discussions, is like building that community around yourself, because there's a lot of support out there and a lot of goodwill from other artists.
There is, yeah, and and finding the right like-minded artists as well. Yeah. So, but most artists, you're right.
Yeah,
we're not a bad bunch.
No, it might be a bit weird, but we're friendly.
Exactly.
So that's my takeaway.
And that's actually the same. It's the same for hobby artists as well. When people are a little bit nervous about going to a class, it's the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody's friendly. Yeah. Okay. On that note, I will say bye for now.
See you soon. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye.